Alright guys, so we're back here in the suite and I want to take time to talk about our second shot. So lighting wise, this is going to be pretty similar, if not almost identical to the last couple shots that we've done. And I think you get the hang of it by this point. So for this lesson, instead of focusing on all the lighting techniques and all the different scrim and all that stuff, we're just going to mostly focus on the composition. There's also a couple new tricks I want to show you that should make your life in Photoshop a little bit easier. So as you can see, this is the middle part of the suite. To my left is the bathroom, to my right is the living room, and right in front is the bedroom. It's an interesting layout and it's pretty tough to photograph, so I did take a few minutes and, as usual, try to find the best composition. If we're going to shoot from the window, the light is really flat and we're looking straight into a closet, and again, we need to showcase the view, so we have to shoot in that direction. From either this angle or this angle, we're so close to the bed that the bed again just becomes enormous, and in order to get it all in the frame, it's just too much work. Now, so I'm backed up into the closet and I'm actually going to be shooting a one-point perspective. Those of you who have followed my work and followed my tutorials know that I absolutely love one-point perspective, so I was really excited to see that we could make this one happen. I think we're going to have some great leading lines, we're going to have a beautiful view, and I can get back far enough that things aren't going to be so crazily distorted. So when we first came into this room, and I was trying to find the right composition, the closet door here, there's actually 4 of them, we took 2 or 3 of them out. You could not put the camera behind the door because they're locked in there, so what we had to do, we called the maintenance guy, he came up, he unscrewed all the hinges for us and everything. We were actually able to get the camera back in the closet door. So here's the difference it makes from standing in front of the door to taking that door off and getting far enough back so we could actually compose and have some room in the frame. So when we're in front of the closet door, the bed is enormous. It takes up almost the entire frame. As soon as we back up, the photo starts to breathe a bit. We can see some bathroom, we can see some living room. We start to get those leading lines that come in, but when we're so close, we miss almost all of that. It's like we're almost on top of the bed getting into it or something, and again, because we're at such a wide angle focal length, things tend to get distorted from that close. So obviously it goes without saying, you don't want to just start taking hotel rooms apart, but with these big budget clients, if it's going to take an extra 15 or 30 minutes to get the perfect shot, go ahead and take the time, do it right. They won't mind at all, and they'll probably appreciate you taking the time to go out of the way to get the perfect shot. This is a pretty good example where like 99% of photographers wouldn't even consider actually trying to move that door. They just try to shoot around it. But don't be afraid to ask for what you want. If you need to get the camera back, find out how you can do it, go ahead and ask, they'll be glad to help. Alright guys, so now we've got our composition dialed, it's time to light this. I'm not going to show you every step because we've done that twice now, but I'm going to run over the steps for you again. What I'm going to do is I'm going to close those sliding wooden doors. I'm going to scrim the bottom of them so that I remove that blue light reflecting off the floor coming into the camera. After that, I need to add a few flashes. I want to bring the light levels up so it's nice and consistent so my life will be easier in Photoshop. It's going to be really simple light with a half CTO on a ProPhoto B1 just bounced into the ceiling, again just to give some fill and even out the light levels in this room. The next problem I noticed was that these bedside lamps were really hot and out of control. Even though I know I could fix these in Photoshop, I'd rather get everything as perfect as I can on location. They're these really weird new kind of light bulbs that they just stick in. I didn't have those in my bag. So what I did was I grabbed some cinefoil and I actually wrapped the cinefoil around the light just to knock it down a couple stops. This ensures that I get a perfect, nice, glowy light on location and that I don't have to tamper with it in Photoshop to get it looking perfect. I love Photoshop, as you probably know, but the more that I can get right in camera, the happier I'm going to be. So now that I've got everything ready to go, it's time to light paint. I've got my beauty dish and I've got my light. As usual, I'm going to throw a half CTO gel on that to warm it up just a little bit. I'm going to light towards the camera to bring out texture and depth, and I'm going to try to cover as much of the room as I can. After I've added all that light, I'm going to turn off my strobes and I'm going to bracket with only the ambient light with the sliding doors shut. Once that's done, I'm going to open those windows, use my flash to light the door frame so I can composite those easily in Photoshop. Then the last thing I do after that is I'm going to bracket with the lights on and the lights off from what the camera thinks is the proper exposure, down 4 or 5 stops and up 4 or 5 stops. So we've done this a few times now, and by this point, you should probably have a pretty good handle on what's going on. Let's take all those pieces into Photoshop, put it all together, and make our second photo in here. We're going to start picking up the pace a little bit here. You've seen the process, you've seen how I work in Lightroom, you've seen how I work on location, you've kind of got the gist for how I work in Photoshop. So I'm not going to bore you to tears with an hour of, alt-click, black layer mask, take a brush in the layer, blah, 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 blah. we're going to get right to the point here. I'm basically going to do a quick edit here in Lightroom. I've already culled these pictures, and we're going to jump right into Photoshop. And I'm just going to go through it relatively quickly. If you want to follow along, feel free to take your time and go at your own pace. But I really want to get to some of the more meaty stuff of this photo. So with that being said, I'm just going to do a quick edit here in Lightroom, do my usual shadows and highlights adjustment, and a quick white balance tweak to get some more proper colors on the room overall. We're going to take these adjustments and let's see, that's a little cool still, something like that. I'm going to apply these to all of my selected images here. That is a synchronize, Command-Alt-Shift here in Lightroom, and we're going to jump right into Photoshop and get to work on this. Alright, so here we are in Photoshop. We're going to go to File, Scripts, Load Files into Stack. Let's go ahead and navigate to this lesson folder and open all these 18 layers right up in Photoshop. Alright, so twice now you have seen how this process works. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to go a bit faster. I'll kind of narrate what I'm doing, like I said, if you want to follow along. Towards the end of this, I'm going to get into some more complicated things, namely frequency separation, which is the most powerful tool when it comes to cloning and fixing and cleaning things up in images like this. But if you wanted to sit back and relax, I'm going to go a bit quicker, get straight to the point, and not spend so much time explaining all of the finer details here. Alright, so here's all our layers. I'm going to go ahead and turn off everything except for the base. And I'm going to start working my way down. So, first thing first, as usual, I got to use my ambient layers and my flash base layer here to kind of blend these all together and hide any trace of my flash. Alright, on to our light painting. Same thing you've seen me do 100 times over. I'm actually going to darken my whole base here so my light pops show up a little bit better. Alright, there's our bed. And again, if I turn that on and off, you can see the amazing difference that light painting can make. Alright, this layer here, you guys can see the flash went everywhere, and all I really want is this left side of the headboard. So I'm going to make a selection. Make sure it stays constrained to that area. Take my brush and start painting some of that in. Don't need to go to 100, that's a bit overkill. Here you can see the problem. This is a fun one because I bumped the chair or someone bumped the chair. I don't really know what happened, but you can see how you have this sort of misalignment error here between the flash layer and the normal layer. So I need to now be very careful when compositing this in to be sure that I don't inadvertently light up something I don't need to light up. So I'll go ahead and I'm just going to paint this whole thing in here, and then I'm going to clean up the edges. So it looks like over here and up top, and especially down most of this side, there's that kind of funky second edge. It's not the end of the world, but it's definitely something you want to avoid. And it looks like it's sort of messed up on another layer too. Try to get all of that. And I'm going to use the pen tool here to make sure that, let's see, I wonder if I can cheat and get away with this. Yeah, because it's only that one chair that moved. So I should be okay with it on the other chair as well. But the problem is, again, when you can see where the chair moved, like all along this front edge, that's no good. So it also looks like some of the bed layer spilled onto it too, so I'll erase that. And again, I just had to be much more careful when I was blending that together. So it's, like I said, it's not the end of the world, but it's something that you kind of want to be aware of. And that's really ugly. So now we start to see we're getting tangled up like in multiple layers here. So avoid bumping or moving the chairs or any object for that matter in the frame at all costs, because you can quickly get into these nasty, nasty situations. But that seems like it's going to be okay. Yeah, I'll just keep that away. That should do it. If I zoom out, it looks pretty good. 100%, it's not 100% perfect, but it's definitely passable. And I feel like if we keep moving through our layers, we'll cover it up better as well. So I'm going to do the right side of this headboard, and the same story is on the left. The light goes everywhere. I only want it on the headboard there. And I'm going to make sure that these blend together seamlessly. Just low opacity, sort of bringing out the textures in that wood, which would otherwise be totally dull and flat. And again, blending that upper part together seamlessly. Okay, something like that. And now let's see, we got the floor. Again, this is way too hot. I just want a little bit at a low opacity. I don't need to go crazy with it. So I'll go to like 20% opacity on my brush here and just very gently bring back some of that detail. Now this whole TV section. For this one, I'm going to pen tool the whole thing out to make sure it doesn't bleed all over the place. That's fine, we can go wide around that, but on the edge of it, we'll keep it nice and straight. All right, now as I was in here, I noticed I got some light on these chairs, which I might use again to cover my tracks from previously where I screwed up and bumped this chair, but we'll see how that develops. So I'm going to go ahead, Command Enter, and Shift F6 to feather that, create a mask. Now I'm going to take my brush, and obviously there's errors and kind of sloppy masking all over the place, so I'm just going to blend these together seamlessly. A little bit of detail on the floor there. And then if I zoom in, let's see if there's anything I can do about these chairs? Yeah, there's a little light down there, maybe right here. Brush in some of that. Again, being careful not to get the bumped area. Okay, so we've got that area. Let's do the bathroom on the left here. Let's see how this looks with lighten versus normal. On the bathroom, I am going to set the blend mode to lighten and brush in some of that. Now the reason I'm going to lighten is that I don't want to paint over the foreground. I just want a little kiss of light on the wood back there. I don't want to go too far because I'll get my softbox in. But that's all we need, just a little lift. Let's see, the shower. See that nice glow down there. I'll click, add a layer mask. If I go to lighten, probably the same thing. I don't see any problem with that. How about this wall over here? Oh yeah, look at the difference in that. So without it, very kind of dull flat, but with that wood lit up, it looks really cool. So, same thing here, take the pen tool. I'm gonna go around. The reason I'm using the pen tool here is I want a very exact mask. If I tried to just mask this in with a brush, right, this would be a mess. It would get all over everything. Even like in light and blend mode, there would be this hot spot on the ceiling. I don't want that. I just want it on this panel. So I'm going to leave the blend mode normal, and using the pen tool, I'm going to get an exact cutout here. All right, and Command Enter, Shift F6 to feather, and I'll get our mask out of that. And I think it's a little bit strong right here, so I'll just grab a brush at 30%, and I'll kind of back it off just a smidge to make it feel a little less bright, a little more natural. And let's get this couch area over here. I'm gonna Alt-click, add a layer mask, take a brush, paint it in. Adds a nice sparkle over there. Okay. Let's see, that almost does it for our light painting. I think this needs to be brightened up, so I wonder if I can steal some of it from the chair's frame. Yeah, there we go. So obviously, I'm gonna have to do some work on this. I'm going to copy that layer, bring it up, delete this old layer mask, and see what I have to work with. All right, so I'm going to Alt-click, add a new layer mask, and start painting in that table. Make a nice, even transition in, and there is where that other chair shows up. And I wonder if I put this on normal. That kind of solves lots of problems, doesn't it? But I gotta be careful here. So you see firsthand how tricky things can get if you move furniture accidentally while you're shooting. It can just turn into a real nightmare. But that looks much better now that we have some light on the table. And back here on this flower, I'm not worried about that because I'm going to remove the windows and replace them. Let's see what else needs a little bit of light. I think that's pretty good. I think this couch area over here could use a little more. Yeah, right there, that looks really good. Okay, so I'll put this on lighten so I can be a bit gentler with the brush. Paint that in. That's looking good. There we go. Okay, so I've got my light painting done. I'll go ahead and condense all this into a group and call it light painting. I'll turn that on and off and you can see the difference that that makes. And now let's go ahead and take care of our windows. So as you've seen me do many times before, I'm just going to pen tool out all the windows anywhere that they appear, whether it's in a mirror or between some chair legs or table legs. Make sure we get all of these, all this window frame. I think we've got everything we need for those windows, so I'm going to go ahead and hit Command Enter, Shift F6 to feather that selection, and I'm going to create a new group, and I'm going to name it aptly Windows. And I'm going to drag those 3 window layers, 1, 2, and 3, into that group. I'm going to turn them on, and I'm going to now apply that selection to the group. And I'm going to start at the bottom, and I'm just going to add a black layer mask and start painting in those flashed windows. Obviously I've got the reflection in the right hand side, so that's no good. Let's see if number 2 fixes that, and yes he does. We can paint that in. And number 1, what are we going to get from you? Not too much, but I'll blend you in at like 30%. All right, now I think my windows are a little too dark. I might have gone a little too crazy with it. So I'm going to add a curves adjustment layer, and I'm just going to bump that up, exposure up outside so that things feel a bit more natural and believable. Again, the brightest part of the frame should be the outdoors because that sunlight is going to be stronger than any flash that we've added inside. So, all right, looking at this, I see a couple quick little errors I made in my light painting. For example, like in the shower down here, I missed a little spot over here on the left. So I'm going to paint that in. And let's see. That should do it for now. All right, I think we've got our light painting done. We've got our windows added. Now I have this layer here, 04. This is the ceiling lights. As you can see, I've got these lights in the ceiling here, which were like so much brighter than everything else in the room. That is what happens if I expose for those lights. So I'm going to Alt-click black layer mask, set the blend mode here to lighten, and I'm just going to paint back in those little cans on the ceiling. Make sure I don't go too far outside of them. There we go. All right, so we've turned on our lights here. Sorry, I'm making noise. All right, and we're almost at the fun part, not quite yet. So right now it's time to clean up and generally declutter this picture. And I'm going to make a new group, and I'm just going to call this Clone and Miscellaneous Removal of Annoying Objects. And I'm going to start in the foreground and kind of work my way back. So first I've got to get rid of this whole nightmare down here. And the way I'm going to do that is similar to the last picture. I'm going to make a selection here. I'm going to select this whole sort of bottom wood panel. And I'm going to create a new layer in that group. I'm going to name it like wood panel lower left. And I'm just going to clone some of this out. Not all of it, but some of it, so that I get a nice clean wood panel there. And once I have everything cloned within the selection, I'm going to go Shift-Command-C to copy all of that, and Command-V to paste it to a new layer. I can rename this Duplicate. And I'm just going to move that up. If you go to move this and something weird happens, make sure that you have your auto select turned off. I'm going to move that up to maybe right there or so. And I'm just going to stretch it so it covers all of that. And I'm going to add a mask here. And I'm just going to blend these two pieces of wood together in a somewhat believably seamless way. And you can skew it and stretch it so that it fits perfectly. And up top here, I'm going to remove it there, and using my mask, I will paint it in. All right, so we've duplicated that and kind of cleaned up this whole area, but to me this looks like it's a little too bright, so I'm going to add a curves layer. I'm going to clip it to this duplicated layer, and I'm just going to adjust that until things seamlessly blend together. And again, you can do that, or you can spend 3 hours trying to clone everything and make it perfect, but that is very, very well done, especially for the amount of time you spent on it. And you can skew this, and there we go. All right, and you can just continue to clean this up a little bit. I'm going to clone out this little wire that made it in to our wood panel there. All right, and now obviously we've got to get rid of this bird's nest over here of wires. So this is going to be similar. You've seen this trick before. I'm going to make a selection of this whole panel back here. And once I have my selection, I'm going to grab my gradient tool over here. I'm going to select, so Alt-click and get my foreground color from the top of that selection, and hit X to switch my color selection tool. Alt-click down the bottom. And now I can drag that gradient up through the selection, which will seamlessly hide all those cables. I'm going to deselect this. I'm going to go to Filter, Add Noise, or Filter, Noise, Add Noise. And I like about 2% just to keep it in line with the rest of the photo. Okay, so that is like a little stubborn piece down here that we can kill. There we go. That is our sort of foreground wire tangle down there. Pretty simple, all things considered. Now I'm just going to take care of the wires on the desk here. And this is the super fun part of hotel photography. Make a selection, again, so that our clone tool does not go everywhere when we're using it. doesn't need to be perfect. We're going to clean it up later when we get into the frequency separation. That'll be good. That'll be good. All right, so that table's all set now. Let's see what else we can do here. There is a kind of distracting reflection of the flash down here. I'm going to kill that. So I'm going to group that together, and I'll call that chords in foreground, and then I'll make a new group, and I'll call this flash reflection on marble. Make a new layer. Or before I even do that, I know what I'm going to have to do here. It looks, I don't know, is that my ambient light that's coming down there? Or is that something else? All right, I'm just going to do this. I'm going to cheat a little bit here. I'm going to take my lasso, and I'm going to copy like all of this lower piece of granite. I'm going to go Shift Command C, Command V to paste. And let's see. We'll start gentle here. I'm going to add a mask to this, and I'm just going to brush out some of that excess. I want everything to match. I don't like this like pinkish color up here, so I'm going to sample from the bottom. And I'm going to paste it again up top here. And I'll line it up with that. You know what, I'm going to flip it horizontal so it doesn't look cloney. Make it a little bigger so it covers everything. Or do I need that side? Yeah, flip it horizontal. I'm going to cover everything and stretch that to fit. And hit Enter, add a mask again, take my brush, make it really small, relatively hard, paint out that edge, again so it lines up, paint out this edge, and paint out the bottom so that it blends seamlessly into the other layers below it. And what we have is a pretty good fixed job. So now I've got my tiles in place, so you can kind of see this like weird sort of mismatched colored edge. It looks a little bit orange. I'm just going to pen tool it all the way down. And I'm just going to desaturate it so it matches the rest of our cloned area. So I'll add a hue and saturation adjustment layer. And I'll just kind of, there we go, that's all it needs. Beautiful. And this can be cleaned up just a smidge. Okay, that's better. And what else? The last thing I think I need to do is take care of this light that's kind of flooding in over here. So this is going to be pretty similar to what we did on our last shot with that gradient trick, but in this case I'm also going to grab some of this ambient frame, number 17, with no color cast or no light. And I'm going to blend in that over this whole wall over here. So go ahead and either grab the pen tool or watch me do this really quickly. And I'm just going to pen tool around all this furniture to extract that wall. So rather than try to like wrangle the color cast with 15 adjustment layers and end up just getting frustrated with the whole process, I'm just going to pen tool this furniture out, extract that wall, drop in the ambient color correct wall, and then brush it in so it matches up seamlessly. Make sure we go and get between all these little nooks of furniture down here. So there's our pen selection. I'm going to go ahead and hit Command Enter, and I'm going to save this selection before I go any further in case I need to bring it back in a minute. So I'm going to go to Select, Save Selection, I'll call it Living Room Wall. And I'm now going to turn on this ambient with the windows open group over here. And I'm going to apply that selection as a mask to that group. And now obviously that looks a bit fake, so I'm just going to brush it out a little bit on the right hand side and kind of seamlessly blend it together. There we go. Something like that will get rid of a lot of that, that blue light that was coming through. And now I'm going to reactivate that selection. Living room wall there, click OK. Make a new layer, make a gradient that goes from like this color here to, let's go to say that color there. I'm going to drag it over all of that. From obviously you want the warmer color by the lamp, whiter color towards the windows. Let's see. That looks about right. And I'm going to add a mask to this and brush that in at, let's say, 30%. I'll brush out some of that natural light from the lamp here, and then up top, so that we have a seamless transition, and we've entirely gotten rid of that plant and that ugly sort of light that was trickling in through those the sliding wooden doors there. And I will go ahead and rename that wall. And the last thing I'm going to do is apply some noise to that. So filter, add noise. And now we have a seamless transition from highlight into the room. And all right, lastly, before we jump into frequency separation, I'm going to go ahead and fix the colors in this picture. This feels super warm to me, so again, using the pen tool, gonna jump around, get all the ceiling, and just like in the last shot, I'm gonna go a little bit low around the ceiling so that I can sort of seamlessly blend into some of that warm light. Obviously don't want to desaturate the wood, so I'm going to avoid that. And in here, I got to take care of this. All right, we've got our selection made. Go ahead and hit Command Enter to turn that into a path. feather it a little bit, and add a new hue and saturation adjustment layer. And I'm going to grab my hand tool and start pulling down those yellows until things start looking nice and crisp and white, right about to there. And again, if I go all the way to white, it looks a little funky, so I like to be like somewhere in this range, so there's a little bit of warmth. And where there's a hard edge, like right in here, for example, you can see that I'm just going to blend this in using a black brush softly so that it fades from clean white ceiling into sort of warm walls. All right, that's looking pretty good. I'm going to go a little further on that. Something like that. Okay, now if I turn that on and off, you can see what a big difference it makes. But it's managed to keep the room somewhat warm. I feel like this over here needs to be much darker. It feels like it's the same luminosity as this headboard, and because of that, it's not very three-dimensional. So I'm going to make a quick selection around this entire piece of wood here. And make a selection around it. And using your favorite adjustment layer, whether that's curves or exposure or something else, I'm just going to sort of take some of that heat off it so it feels three-dimensional. Like, look, that feels flat to me. It looks like it's not a 3D object. That feels much more three-dimensional, right? Because now it has a bit of shadow, and before it did not. So just add a little bit of dimension to that wall. And I'm going to paint it out, some of that exposure, maybe a little bit down here, so it's not so dark. All right, there we go. I think this is looking really good. This is a bit funky. I'm going to fix this really quick. The saturation on the wood here. Okay, so that looks really, really good. What I really wanted to teach you in this lesson was frequency separation, which is, you might have heard about it for use in beauty photography or maybe in architectural photography. It's not something that's used super, super often in architecture, but when you're doing hotels and you're dealing with like beds and wood and little imperfections, it's such a good tool. It has so many uses, and I'll use it throughout this tutorial. But I want to teach you the basics of frequency separation. Now, a little setup information here. If I were to try to clone out all the wrinkles in this bed, like amongst this pattern here, and in the those really delicate whites and warm tones down here, it would be a nightmare. It would take forever, right? If I wanted to clone all this stuff out and all these little folds in the pillow, I'm sure we've all tried it before, and it goes pear-shaped very, very quickly. So enter frequency separation. So this has to be the last thing, or almost the last thing, that you do before you save your file. So what we're going to do is we're going to go Command-Alt-Shift-E, Command-Alt-Shift-E, and flatten everything in this picture into a new layer. I'm going to do it twice, right? And I'm going to rename the bottom of these two layers. I'm going to name that color, and I'm going to name the one above that texture. And for the time being, let's go ahead and turn off that texture layer. And on this color layer here, what we want to do is go to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur. And I usually use a radius between 10 and 20 pixels. Once you get a little more experience with it and you learn how the effect works, you can vary these numbers accordingly. This is going to set up your color layer, so we'll go with like 17.6, that's fine for now. And then on the texture layer, you can go ahead and turn that on. I'm going to go to Image, Apply Image, and you're going to get this dialog box right here. And what you want to do is, where it says layer right here, from merged, select color, and what this is going to be doing is applying this image to the color layer below it. You want to make sure everything in this dialog box matches up. You want to have your blending on subtract, you want to have your opacity at 100%, your scale at 2, and your offset at 128. If you poke around on the internet and you Google like frequency separation article f-stoppers, there are amazing articles on f-stoppers that will explain the different settings for different image types, but for JPEGs and 8-bit images, which is normally what people work with, these are the settings that you're going to want to use. So once you have everything here lined up, go ahead and click OK. And what you're going to get is this like funky high pass looking filter over your entire image. Now don't panic, nothing is wrong. Go ahead and change the blend mode here to linear light. All right, and now we're going to be back at square one where we were with a normal looking picture. So we have our texture layer here, which is our high pass layer, and our blurry color layer below it, and that's how we're going to adjust our colors. So one of the most amazing things about frequency separation is how easy it is to clone. So if I want to clean up all these little ripples in the bed here and get these sheets looking perfect, I'm going to grab my clone stamp. You can hit S and activate your clone stamp tool. And I want to make sure that my clone sample mode is set to current layer. If you're on current and below, you get this funky like screen mode thing that doesn't work. You want to make sure that your clone sample mode is on current layer. Now take your clone stamp and make sure you're on this texture layer and go ahead and click somewhere next to this where it has a nice texture that you want to duplicate. This looks perfect over here. This is obviously a messy, wrinkly bit. So sample some of this and paint over those wrinkles. And as you can see, this is doing an utterly sublimely perfect job of getting rid of all those wrinkles. Now you can do the same thing that I do when I'm normally cloning. You can make like a quick selection to confine your cloning to certain areas of the frame. So if I don't want to go over the edge or onto the runner of the bed here or up top, I can make a selection. And again, I can even clone from over here and get a perfect texture through all those color changes. And I can take that again and go down the bottom here and over on the right-hand side, and it even will preserve your shadows, which is just amazing. So again, I'm just doing this very quickly, getting rid of all those wrinkles and funny folds, and it looks utterly perfect with almost no effort. All right, so we've done that area. Let's go ahead and take care of this, do the same thing. And we'll dive into some of the more complex uses of this later on in the tutorial. But we have a virtually perfect steamer here in Photoshop. All right, now if I group these together, you can't just flick the layers on and off. You have to group them together and call it frequency separation. And then you can see what a difference that makes. And if you zoom in at 100%, it's pretty much perfect. All right, so now I can go on and do the rest of the bed here. Personally, I don't want to remove all the wrinkles. I'm being a little bit heavy-handed so you guys can see the power of the tool, but I don't think you need to go super, super far with it. I like to leave some realism there because perfection does tend to erase any sort of humanity. So I'm not going to take everything out, and you can do this to your taste. Something like that should be plenty. All right, now we can go ahead and zoom in, and using the same method, clean up the wood. So in essence, what this is doing is separating the image into high frequency and low frequency layers, extracting the texture or the color. I don't think we'll need the color layer for this image at all, but we will be using it in the future. Just want to keep things simple for now and show you how to perfectly recreate textures without going crazy using the clone stamp tool. Here's a good example of where we can use the color layer. So if I'm working on the texture layer here, I'll go ahead and hide the selection, and I want to clone out this little, it looks like the bedpost right there, and I try to just clone over that. What I'm left with is kind of like this hazy, funky thing because the texture over here and the color here don't really match up. So if I go to the color layer and then sample the same area, I then seamlessly clone out that little object. So you got to kind of work on both layers if you've got an object like that. But for simple like texture corrections, like little blemishes on the floor, for the most part you can stay on your color, on your texture layer. Here's another great example of how frequency separation will work. So I'll just do like a normal clone layer here, and I'll show you how much of a nightmare it might be, for example, to clone out this fold in the runner here. Now I might have to sample some of this, and then sample some of this, and somehow get that all to line up, and now sample some of this, or like, geez, I don't know, some of this perhaps. And then you can see like things start to fall apart very quickly when you're trying to get this line out. But if I just delete that layer and go back to your texture, set your sample mode to current layer, and then look, just grab this texture. Doesn't really matter where it is. For example, like right here. Sample it, pull it over. You get like such an easier time of cloning this rather than having to go piece by piece using the old-fashioned clone stamp tool. And now I can just grab some of this texture here and paint right over that without having to worry so much about picking up some of those weird variations in color or tonality. Look at that, beautiful, right? Imagine trying to clone that out with the old clones, like the normal clone stamp tool. We'd be there for hours. I'll grab some color. I'll grab this color and sort of even that out. Again, you can see sometimes the texture puts the texture down but leaves the color behind. So if I grab this texture and try to go over, you get this kind of blotchiness down here. So I'll grab the color layer, sample that color, paint it in, and it's looking perfect. All right. So I could keep doing this for hours and hours and hours and make this totally perfect, but I think you guys kind of understand. Okay, so this image looks great. There's one more thing that's bugging me. That's the TV, this ugly reflection in there. So just like I did in the last shot, I'm gonna make a selection around the screen. And we're gonna get that out of there. Name it TV. Drag a gradient across it. That way, a little darker. Something like that. And then put the opacity at like 95%. So there's a smidgen of a realistic reflection there, but it's much, much better than it was before. And I'll add a little noise to it. So that it blends in with the rest of the image seamlessly. All right, so that's looking really good. I'm going to Command-Alt-Shift-E and flatten all to a new layer. Drag out my vertical rulers to make sure everything's nice and straight. And my horizontal rulers, again, because this is a one-point perspective, not only does it have to be even up and down, but also left to right, because we've got that perfect vanishing point in the middle of the frame. So you want nice horizontals and nice verticals. It looks like we have a little bit of barrel distortion from that 17 tilt shift, so I'm just going to do a quick round of lens correction on this, get everything nice and straight, hit OK, and I can now skew out my vertical lines. All right, I'm going to go ahead and hit Enter. And I'm going to go ahead and save this as a PSB. I'm sure it's bigger than 2 gigabytes, so I'll go Final, 1-point perspective, hit Enter to save, and that's our final shot. Okay, so by now you should kind of understand what I do to do my light-painted hotel interiors. The big takeaway from that one was frequency separation, which is a hugely invaluable tool when you're cloning really complicated things like beds and sheets and little runners and wood, where the texture can really get in your way. Frequency separation makes it so much easier to clone those things absolutely perfectly. We're going to use that on almost every shot from here on out, so it's worth getting the basics down now. So we have one more shot in here, which is the bathroom, which is slightly different, pretty similar in post, but a different shot on location. We're going to get to that, and then we're going to be all set with this room.